All right, today we're going to be talking about script writing, the basics, and I just want to give a shout out to one of the communications media majors who did an independent study with me this semester. Her name is Stephanie Blannard, and she did an independent study with me on how to make an instructional video. And we're now recording a component part of that instructional video. And what she wrote about was something that she had learned in COM 303, script writing. And so we're doing an instructional video on script writing, or the basics of script writing. So we're going to start off with what the heck is script writing? Script writing is the art and craft of writing scripts for mass media, such as feature films, television productions, video games. And it's frequently a freelance profession. So if your concept is, I want to be a writer, I'm going to go work for a company and be a script writer, chances are that's not really where the work is going to be. Most script writers work freelance. I work for myself. I get hired by companies. If I don't write good scripts, I don't get hired. And I end up working at McDonald's or something. So it's an exciting profession for people who are very good at it. There's good work and there can be great rewards. It's also a very creative outlet. But it's a profession that is predominantly freelance. Now, there are, of course, television series that hire writers, and the writers are given full-time jobs, so those do exist. All right, a script is the text of the play, the broadcast, or a movie. The script is what all the actors get. It is what the crew look at. The director is using it. It's the common ground. It's everybody. This is our understanding of this production will come out of this script. The treatment is a written sketch that outlines the plot, the characters, the action for a screenplay, but it does not include certain elements such as that a finished screenplay would have, such as camera directions or even dialogue. So it's really just sort of an outline of the idea. So this is going to happen, that's going to happen, then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. A treatment is a very quick overview or outline that the script will be drawn from. And frequently, when you are working on a script, you start with a treatment. And you build the treatment, and then you come in and you say to the powers that be, here is the treatment, this is where we're going with this. What do you think of it? Do you like it? What changes would you make? So it's great for making some pitches and for making sure you're on the right path. Now, the overall concept that the script is based off of is the theme, or perhaps even an image that embodies the design. So you all know of my deep and abiding love of the movie The Incredibles. If you look at this image, you immediately get the concept of The Incredibles, which is a family of superheroes. We look at this and boom! They're wearing costumes, they've got masks, it's mom, it's dad, there's 3 little kids. I got a family of superheroes. There is the core concept of The Incredibles. So whatever you're developing, your script, you should be able to tell somebody the concept very quickly. You might even be able to provide them with an image that very quickly says, this is the concept. In this case, we could pitch this and say, this is what we're thinking. A script about superhero family. So what does all this mean? It means that if you want to write down the basic idea of what your script is going to be about, that's your initial goal. What is my script going to be about? And the treatment really is the most important task as you are getting started. Because if you can't sell anybody on the treatment, there's no point in going ahead with the script. There's no point in it. Nobody's going to buy it. It's going to be a lot of time. And you'll see people out in Hollywood running around trying to shop their scripts around. But the people who are experienced don't shop around scripts. They shop around treatments. And if somebody wants to buy the treatment, they develop the script. Okay, you want to make sure that you have a solid idea before you move on with the script. It also helps if you have people that you can bounce ideas off of who are good at telling you that stinks, that's good. All right, genre. There's a long list of genres that your script can be about. You can make it an action adventure, a drama, a comedy, epic, myth, horror, romance, thriller, mystery, suspense, children, animated, fantasy, science fiction, sports, western, and supernatural. You can have all kinds of different genres. And it is okay to combine genres. You can put genres together. But you have to be careful. You can get a problem by combining too many genres. The problem is that if you combine too many, you will confuse the audience. Now, who can tell me what they think the genres are of The Incredibles? Go ahead. It's an action adventure. Go ahead.
Comedy.
It is a comedy. What else? It's children animated. Okay? So we have all of these elements coming together. That is a lot of genres to combine. And yet it works out very well. It works out very well. It's a tight script. It's a tight story. It's a well-respected movie. It's a well-respected script, even though it combines many genres. An example of a movie that has struggled under its combination of genres is Rango. Rango looks like a children's animated movie, but it has adult themes, not adult content, not what we would think is perhaps erotic, but it has very sophisticated themes running through it that make children sit there and say, I don't get Rango. I don't quite get it. My older children really liked Rango. My younger children said, this is boring, this is dull. The genres got somewhat confused. So you want to be careful when you're combining genres that you have sort of a tight approach to them. Now, within your genre, you're going to have characters. The USA Network for a long time said their tagline was, characters wanted here. By and large, you want rich characters, interesting characters. You want people who, when they walk on the screen, we're instantly engaged in them. We're immediately interested in them. So the characters have to take on qualities that distinguish one from the other. Think of the recent movie, The Avengers. The Avengers is full of characters, but the characters are all very different. We have the Hulk, who is a scientist who would love to not be in this situation. We have Thor, who's an alien, whose race basically considers themselves to be gods. Captain America, who is a man out of time, a man from the 40s living in modern time and trying to adjust. We have Iron Man, who's a billionaire playboy, thinks this is all a big joke and fun. You have Black Widow, who is a spy. Hawkeye is also a spy, but they differentiate his character from Black Widow as he is more of an operative. He's more of a person who goes out and conducts action. She is a mystery. She is a shadow. So they differentiate the characters. If you have all the characters the same, it gets boring. Why do we even need these other characters? Why do we even need these other people? They're all running together. I can't follow the characters. So character qualities are very important in terms of getting us to engage in those characters. Okay, who are the characters in the script going to be? Each character needs to play an important role. That role, that important role, could just be person in the background. You might say, I don't really think that's a very important role. It's a very important role. If I'm trying to convey city, I need people in the background. Cities are bustling. Cities have people moving. All those people are minor characters, but they're important. I might have major characters who play important plot points. In The Incredibles, Mrs. Incredible in the original treatment had a sidekick. He was her Robin to her Batman. And he went everywhere with her, and he was her pilot. Whenever she had to fly somewhere, he was the one who had the plane and could fly. And he was a major character, and he was going to play an important role in The Incredibles. But as the film was being developed, they said, we don't need this character. We're spending too much time on him. He's not important to the story. And there is one point where they killed him off, and the directors recoiled in horror. Because Mrs. Incredible had to choose between saving her sidekick, who in the exposition they had established was very important to her, a dear friend, and she has to choose between saving him and saving her children. And she looks at him because she has this 20-year alliance with him, 20 years of, we've been this like this. You save me, I save you. And he looks at her, and with a look, he conveys to her, I'm done. Go get your children. And she turns and she saves her children, and she watches her friend get killed. And the director said, that's horrible. This is a child's movie. And the director was like, no, these people are really serious. They'll kill you. I got to really convey that these people are really serious killers. And they said, no, it's a Pixar movie. Tone it down. How? He's useless. Get rid of him. And they wrote him out of the script. He was interfering with the story. He took the story where it didn't need to go for that target audience. So even though the director wanted to tell that story, even though that character was in the script, they eliminate the character. How did they eliminate him? Mrs. Incredible could pilot a plane. Done. He's gone. And if he can be removed that easily, then he's pretty much okay to remove. They need to have a purpose. One thing to watch is having too many characters that can cause the reader or the viewer to become confused. Who is this guy? What is his relationship to her? Was it an intimate relationship? Was this somebody who competed for her affection with Mr. Incredible? I don't want to answer all these questions. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to write him out of the script. He's gone. She can fly the plane. Done. So sometimes we get rid of characters. The purpose is important because characters need to have a reason to be there. You want to make sure the characters in your script each have a purpose that is introduced and then concluded. You cannot just have a character walk off and the audience going, what happened to that person? Because they start to care. If this person just disappears, then the audience feels like there is a loose end. They leave the auditorium feeling like that's not resolved. What about this person? Now, sometimes we do that on purpose. Okay? I love action-adventure movies. I really do. So I really enjoyed Captain America. I thought that was a fun little movie. His best friend, Bucky, falls out of a train off of a towering cliff. And we walked out of there, and my kids said, I'm really sad they killed Bucky. I said, Bucky's not dead. Yeah, Dad, he died. We watched him fall out of the train. Where was Bucky when they found Bucky? Bucky was lying on a cot. All the other prisoners were in cells. Why was Bucky on a cot? Why was he in a medical facility? Were they experimenting on Bucky? What would they be experimenting? Captain America is a superhero. His arch villain is a superhero. Oh my gosh, they are experimenting on Bucky. And so many people walked out of that auditorium saying, what happened to Bucky? They didn't go down and look for him. They didn't go try to find the body. That's usually not the way the military operates. They try to do recovery. What happened to Bucky? Well, we've seen the treatment now for the Winter Soldier, the sequel to Captain America. He's going to fight the Winter Soldier. Somebody who has the super serum that he has that makes him a superhero. and that superhero is Bucky. So they left it hanging on purpose. But by and large, you want to resolve characters. So let's look at resolving characters. Here's characters from The Incredibles. We have Edna Mode. We see her at the beginning. She's at their wedding, so she's a longtime friend. We see her building a costume for Mr. Incredible. We see her talking to Mrs. Incredible and encouraging her to go after her husband and be a superhero again. We don't really need a big resolution on Edna because she's where she is. She's in her mansion, ready to design costumes. We leave the story with her there. She's not in danger. She's not in peril. She's resolved. Syndrome. We see him at the beginning. He has a solid beginning as a little boy who wants to be Mr. Incredible's sidekick and is rebuffed by Mr. Incredible. He becomes Syndrome, this techno wizard, this villain. And by the end of the film, we see that he is apparently destroyed. And so we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end with each of these characters who develop as the script moves along. They're not static. They all grow. So as you're looking at your characters, how are they changing? How are they growing? What are Aesop fables all about? Aesop fables are about people learning lessons. What is learning a lesson? It's change. It's change. So my script needs to reflect that change. The protagonist is the main character. He's the hero, or she is the hero of the story. They are the center of the entire work. So here we have Mr. Incredible. Although the movie focuses on Mrs. Incredible and Syndrome, it focuses on lots of other characters, the main character is Mr. Incredible. He is the one we follow from the beginning. He is the first character to appear. Is this thing on? Right to the end, where he is unified with his family. By the way, note that he starts the movie alone. He ends it with the family. Change, growth. The character has resolved. The antagonist, the opposite of the protagonist, is the villain. The antagonist does not have to necessarily be a two-dimensional villain like Syndrome. Syndrome's actually fairly three-dimensional because he is rebuffed by Mr. Incredible. He believes because he has no superpowers. And so he hates everyone who has superpowers. And he decides that what he's going to do is kill everybody who has a superpower. And he's going to make everybody have the same gadgets he does so that everybody's super. And his great line in the movie is, and when everybody is super, nobody will be. That's how he's going to get rid of superheroes. So he's a deep character. He's not two-dimensional. But he is malevolent. Your antagonist does not necessarily have to be malevolent. Look at the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise is the protagonist. The hare is the antagonist because the hare is antagonizing the tortoise. The hare's not evil. The hare's not malevolent. But the hare is the one causing the conflict. And we're about to talk about conflict. In a script, to make us engage with it, we need to have conflict. Conflict engages us. We are interested in seeing conflict resolved. So we'll leave the antagonist, and we'll look at some more concepts before we get to conflict. The setting. If you look carefully at The Incredibles, especially when they are not in costume, you will note that the cars are all 1968, 1969 vintage. They want you to believe that The Incredibles is taking place in the 60s and that their heyday was in the 50s. When we open with the documentary, The Incredibles are all in the early 50s, when anything was possible. We are now in the 60s, where there is conflict, where reality is setting in. And in the 60s, there was a sharp idea of reality. And so we put The Incredibles into reality. Cars, houses, kitchens, leftovers. We want to firmly embed The Incredibles into this setting of the mundane. And Mrs. Incredible is apparently happy in this mundane world. She's at least trying to hold it together. The children are miserable. And Mr. Incredible wants out. Not of the marriage, but of the mundane. So we're starting to see that the setting really is lending itself to the story. It's not arbitrarily chosen. It's chosen because this setting, this time period, really helps to convey that they are in the mundane. As we move the setting through the story, through the script, we will take them to futuristic places. Like an island with a secret base where all the hallways are tubes. That's cool. You don't see that every day. You know, I think the next building they build at IUP should have tubes for hallways. Wouldn't that be awesome? We'd have tubes. I don't know why. It would just be really great. Okay? So we see, you don't see tubes. You don't see tubes. You see kitchens. We see parking lots. We see all the things that are early on in The Incredibles, but as we move the story along, we leave the mundane and the setting changes to go to that which is fantastical. Places that have hallways that are tubes. I love it. So all of this is great. We've got characters and we've got settings, we've got a genre. Now we need a plot. And the plot is the story. I've taught you this semester Freytag's plot pyramid. Freytag said most plots, not all, most plots follow this pyramid. And people like the pyramid. They like getting to know the characters. They like having an inciting incident. They like the rising action. They like the climax, the falling action, the resolution, and the denouement, which many of you need to learn to spell. The plot is the pattern of events or the main story in which the narrative or the drama exists. Without a good plot, all we have is a great character. And a great character is not enough. And there are lots and lots of movies that have a great character. Again, in the Avengers, one of the characters that was most popular, the people were most excited about, that writers were saying, I really like this character, I'm glad they had this character, was the Hulk. That surprised everybody. Why? Because there were 2 previous Hulk movies, and they bombed. So how can the Hulk be the best thing in the Avengers when, on his own, he had 2 failed movies? And the answer is, both of those stories had weak plots. They had a good character, they had a neat genre, but they lacked plot. And so they failed. And even the best story, even the best characters cannot hold up a movie without a plot. So, we need to develop a good plot. So let's look at The Incredibles plot. A family of superpowered individuals discovers they can only be a super family when they work together to save the world. See, it's not enough. The concept in and of itself is not enough. A superhero family, that's the concept. The plot is they're miserable together when they're trying to be a normal family. When they embrace who they really are, they get along just fine. They actually work together beautifully. And I love the scene where the daughter, who can turn invisible and make force fields, she makes a force field around her little brother Dash and suddenly realizes she can make a force field around people. It's the first time she's ever done that. It's big, and bullets are bouncing off of it. And Dash looks at her and goes, "How are you doing that?" And she goes, "I don't know." And he goes, "Well, don't stop." And he starts to run, which makes the bubble roll. And they're working together. That's a crucial moment in the film, because up until that point, they hate each other. They're arguing and they're fighting and they're teasing. Suddenly, it's your superpower and my superpower combined means we're bulletproof and we can move really fast. That's pretty cool. So we need to see the plot move. And the motion of this concept is the family starts off disunified and they move to unified. That's a good plot. Conflict is an important part of the plot. We need some conflict. If everybody's getting along really, really well, there's no story. Can you imagine how boring the Avengers would be if it was just another day at Stark Tower? Everybody's just making coffee, hanging out. Thor's really strong. Hope the Bruce Banner doesn't turn into the Hulk. What do you guys want to eat for dinner tonight? It doesn't matter if we have really great characters. It doesn't matter if we have a really cool setting. We need a conflict to arise that drives the characters to do something. In drama, there's a conflict. In comedy, there's a conflict. There can be multiple conflicts within the story. We talked before about Syndrome in The Incredibles. Syndrome has a conflict with Mr. Incredible. He wants to kill all the superheroes so that nobody will be super. That's a conflict. But Mrs. Incredible, look how mad she is. Look how angry that woman is. That is an angry woman. And she's a superhero, so she's nobody you want to mess with. And she's already proven that in the movie by this point. We've seen her take out a number of people. Look at him. Does he look mad? No, he's smiling. He's looking at her. This is a wonderful scene, because this is the scene where she's like, "What are you doing on this island? Why are you back in your superhero costume? Why are you here trying to do hero work? You put our entire family in danger." And he's sitting there going, "I know you're mad at me, but I'm just so happy to see you." There's conflict. And just because he's happy doesn't mean she is. And she wants that conflict resolved. And you know what? We want the conflict resolved. We want couples to get along. That's really important to us. We want there to be a resolution. We don't want Mr. and Mrs. Incredible to get a divorce. We want them to end up together at the end. So we've got a conflict that's really bugging us, and we're really, I hope they work this out, because boy, look at how mad she is. Look at that look on her face. That's not for Syndrome, that's for him. There could be all kinds of conflicts. We talked about the conflict between the brother and the sister. They're mad at each other. We're going to resolve all these conflicts. Now, action. In a good script, even if it's a drama, even if it's a period piece, we need action. Think of Romeo and Juliet. It's romantic, it's a tragedy. We don't think of it as an action adventure, although there's some swordplay. Somebody gets killed. There is some action. But when we're talking about action in a script, We're talking about the concept that people want to watch things happen. They don't necessarily want you to tell them what happened. So here's a rule of thumb for your scripts. If you can show it rather than tell it, show it. Action. I can get a narrator to come on and say, Romeo and Juliet were falling in love. Beautiful, lovely. What would be better is to have Romeo and Juliet talking to each other about love, holding each other's hands, caressing each other, looking longingly into each other's eyes. That will do a much better job of conveying by action than what the narrator could accomplish by telling us. So when you can show action, you want to. And the action is the series of events that make up the episodes that form the plot of the story. So the exposition is part of the action. The inciting incident is part of the action. The rising action is part of the action. Well named, huh? The climax is part of the action. The falling action, is there an echo? Is part of the action. The resolution is part of the action. The denouement is part of the action. All of these actions combine to help us tell this story. There can be many actions in a story, but you always want to get back to the main conflict that plays out through the entire script. The conflict also needs to be resolved in some way by the end of the script. Now, I say that in some way. There's latitude here. When we saw The Empire Strikes Back, I was a little guy. Star Wars came out when I was 10. We waited 4 freaking years, so I was 14 when Empire Strikes Back came out. We were tired of waiting. We were terrified because there was a rumor there was a Muppet in The Empire Strikes Back. And we were like, oh no, a Muppet, they've ruined Star Wars. We had no concept of Yoda yet. Okay? When The Empire Strikes Back ends, we were left in the theater going, and Luke had his arm cut off. Han Solo was taken captive. Darth Vader got away. And they ended the movie. And we were like, wait a minute. It's not over. My brothers and I, we sat in the theater. We were like, we're not moving. Not until they get back in here and finish that movie. And George Lucas is like, 4 more years. Oh, 4 more years? Yes. And I'm going to bring teddy bears. Oh, horrible. We wanted him to resolve it. They did resolve it in many ways. The name of the movie was The Empire Strikes Back. It had to end with the Empire basically being on top. So there is a resolution. It's just not a real satisfying resolution. And that was okay because they wanted to make another movie. And they wanted us to come back for that one. Now that one was supposed to be the end of it, and most of us wish it was. But the Return of the Jedi does have full resolution to most of the conflict. That was okay. So when I'm saying this, I'm saying it needs to be resolved in some way. Remember the plot pyramid in terms of figuring out how am I going to structure my action. So in The Incredibles, we start off with the exposition and we get a documentary. We get the characters talking, what it's like to be a hero. Then we have an inciting incident. We flash forward to the future. The Incredibles are married. They have kids. They're living in a suburban life. Mr. Incredible's an insurance salesman. Life is really, really boring. But at night, he's moonlighting and doing hero work. He's putting on a ski mask and jumping into burning buildings. Rising action. He gets called. Would you like to do some real hero work? Get paid some real money. So he goes to Nomanasan Island. And he has a big battle with a robot. Yeah, that's life, baby. That's superhero work. We get to the climax. He is captured. His wife and children who have come after him are shot down. Things look grim for the Incredibles. Falling action. They manage to get free, and they run back to the city to fight the giant robot that was sent there by Syndrome. Resolution. They defeat the robot, and they defeat Syndrome. No caps! If you don't know what I'm talking about, you really need to watch the movie. Suffice it to say, no caps! Dunamo, see how it's spelled. Dunamo, they are a family of superheroes. They are unified. They're working together. They are no longer in the mundane. All right, target audience, something we've struggled with all semester. Something that my students frequently struggle with. Who is your audience? You want to know who is the audience. The first time that The Hobbit was sent to a publisher, the publisher read it and said, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't get it. What the heck is a hobbit? Never. Why don't they just call it an elf or something and be done with it? I mean, why a hobbit? It's never heard of this. I don't get it. But I'll take it home and I'll give it to my son, who was 10. And the son read it, came out of the bedroom and said, Dad? He says, yeah. He says, publish it. He said, okay. And he published it. And it was a big seller for them. It was a big seller. The father was not the target audience. It was his son. The father was smart enough to say, I need to find the target audience and see what they think of it. So let me ask you, you've all been working on your Aesop fables. And this might change for future classes, so if you're looking on this on screen, it might be different for you. But this group has been making Aesop fables for a who? Who's the target audience? 6-year-old girl. How many of you have run your stories by a 6-year-old girl? I got a couple of hands. Are there no 6-year-old girls? Have we completely run out of 6-year-old girls? Do you not have homes? Do you not have brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, nieces? You need to go and find a 6-year-old girl. Run your story. What you should think about is age, gender, background, area, income. All of these factors go into your target audience. Choose the audience that matches who you want to read the script. Really, really target your audience. And understand that it's great when you get a crossover. It's fun when you've made a movie and another audience picks it up. That's awesome. More money. But if the target audience doesn't get it, probably nobody's going to get it. If the target audience doesn't get it, probably nobody will get it. See, Shrek really did a lot of damage. Shrek's a fun movie. Shrek decided for a two-prong approach, two audiences. Little kids and their parents. See, a lot of parents will just sit through a movie. They'll just sit through a movie. They'll hate every minute of it. But as long as the kids are laughing and are entertained, they feel like it's worth it. Parents do that. Shrek said, what if we made a movie that little kids liked? We'll have a gingerbread man. We'll have a big ogre who's actually friendly. And he'll do things that kids like pull boogers out of his nose. But we'll also have some sophisticated humor in there for the adults. And so it was a big success. Parents love to go see Shrek. Kids like to go see Shrek. Shrek's hard to do because Shrek couldn't cross the line of making the movie so adult that it was not appropriate for children. So Shrek walks a very, very fine line that's hard to do. Rango attempted to do that. We'll make a sophisticated script, a sophisticated movie with sophisticated themes with lots of cute little animals, and kids didn't get it. It just went over their heads. So parents never went to Rango because the only reason they were going to a cartoon was to go see it with their kids. The kids didn't want to see Rango. The word of mouth spread very quickly. It's a boring movie. Okay, then I don't want to go see Rango. So Rango doesn't do well. Target your audience carefully. All right, the outline is what you're going to do from the beginning to the end of the script. You have to have 3 main points with 2 subpoints for each main point. Your outline is the script in bullet form. Basically, if you can't come up with 3 major points and at least 2 points under each one, you don't have enough of a story to tell. We tend to call this first act, second act, and third act. First act, second act, and third act. So, first act, documentary and insurance work. That's The Incredibles. In the first act, we start with the documentary, and then we see the mundane life with the insurance work. Second act, hero work, No Man's Island, capture. The second act almost always ends at the climax. It almost always ends right at the climax. The third act is the city fight, Syndrome defeated, and a happy family of heroes. First act, second act, third act. Now the main points should be big events that happen in the script. The subpoints are the little events that make up the big parts. You should also have an introduction to your script. You might need some backstory to help fill in where the characters came from and what the reader needs to know to start off the script. There should also be a conclusion. This should sum up your script and bring all the events to a close. When we're talking about things like backstory, do you remember the scene, if you saw The Incredibles, there's a scene early on where Mr. Incredible is trying to get to his wedding. And Frozone slides by and says, "Hey man, you're late." And he goes, "I still got time." And he's like, "You better hurry." And off he goes. What have we learned? Those two are friends. They know each other. We just instantly got a whole bunch of backstory. It's not a major part of the film, but they can convey it very quickly and very easily. So we have an introduction, our documentary, we have some backstory, okay? Then we have a nice conclusion that wraps everything up, brings it to a close. The Incredibles are a happy family. All right, the establishing shot. The establishing shot in filmmaking and television production sets up or establishes the context for a scene by showing the relationship between its important figures and its objects. So at the beginning we have to have some kind of an establishment. Who are these people? How do they relate to each other? We get that with the documentary. We get that with the initial scene where Mr. Incredible saves the guy from suicide and he meets the boy who will eventually grow up and become Syndrome. And we also get a setup of who these characters are and what their lives are about. We need to set up that relationship early on. We have a drunken father who is in love with his son, in love with his wife, but sees himself as a failure. That setup is very early. That establishing shot is early in War Horse so that we understand who the characters are. The establishing shot is not necessarily the exposition. It's rather part of the exposition. In The Incredibles, the establishing shot is the documentary at the beginning. The exposition also includes the insurance work. So the exposition is much larger. But I have to have an immediate shot that tells me who the characters are, what their relationship is together. The point of view is the position from the script in terms of how am I understanding this. If I have the main character narrating the story, it was hot in this city that day. It looked like it was going to be like any other day in this big fat jungle of steel and glass. But then she walked in. Okay, that's first person. And Sam Spade is just going to narrate the whole movie. He's going to come in and tell us things. And we see the whole movie from his perspective. So what is the position of the story? What position are we getting the story from? What is the perspective of the story? Generally, the point of view can be divided into first, second, and third person. First person would be the Blair Witch Project, where the camera is a character, and we see it following through the movie, all the scary scenes where the camera's jerking and jittering, and it's part of the action. Second person would be Sherlock Holmes, where Watson is relating to us everything that happens in second person. I was with Holmes. I watched him do this. I watched him do that. Third person would be the Avengers, where we have this godlike view of the action. We just show up anywhere we want. The camera takes us and we have this godlike view. The hook is a means of attracting interest, attention, or enticement. It leads us in. So we see a documentary about Mr. Incredible. Okay, great. Anybody can talk in front of a camera. We need to believe Mr. Incredible is amazing. And so Mr. Incredible sees a man falling from a building. He jumps off of another building, catches the man in midair, bursts through a glass wall, rolls, saves the man, gets up, hears something, protects the man from an oncoming explosion. We see a very small villain in the movie come forth, Bon Voyage, who's dressed as a mime, a French mime, so we hate him automatically. He shows up, by the way, in Ratatouille. If you watch Ratatouille very carefully, they're walking down the streets of Paris. You'll see a mime on the side of the road. It's Bon Voyage. He makes another appearance in another Pixar film. Bon Voyage shows up, and he gets away. But Mr. Incredible is after him. We see Mr. Incredible. We have this hook that leads us in and says, hey, these people are neat. This is pretty amazing. They've got superpowers. They can do amazing things. We see Frozone. We see Mrs. Incredible, at that time known as Elastigirl. Dialogue. Dialogue is in the lines or the passages of the script that are intended to be spoken. And as I've told you before, you don't want to tell when you can show action. Dialogue is actually part of the action. And while you're writing dialogue, you need to be specific and illustrate details so the reader is reading, so that while the reader is reading, they feel like they can see what's going on. Avoid cliches. This goes for the rest of your writing for the rest of your lives. Don't use cliches. Excuse me. If you've heard the line somewhere else, don't use it. If you've heard the phrase somewhere else, just don't write it. Avoid cliches, buzzwords. These will confuse the reader, and not everyone can make sense of what you're writing. So you want to write dialogue. Dialogue is not something that should be avoided. There are wonderful, wonderful films, plays, that are all dialogue. 12 Angry Men, My Dinner with Maury. These are very engaging stories that are all dialogue. Direction. Direction is the instruction or a series of instructions for doing or finding something, often used in the plural. Okay? And the direction is part of the script. The character should move to the left. The character should stand where they are. This character, sensing something, turns. When you see those comments in a script, they are providing direction to the characters. Now, there will be a director, and the director may augment the script or change the script, but the characters are going to need direction within the script to tell them what they're going to need to do. You're going to want to use modifiers, and they're words or phrases or clauses that limit or qualifies the sense of another word or group. Basically, it's something that changes or puts a twist on the plot line or in the script. So it's a phrase that you stick in there that helps the actors to understand how to convey the line. It's part of direction, but it basically gives them an example of how to act it out. Early in The Incredibles, we see this line, everyone is special, which is another way of saying that nobody is. Later in The Incredibles, I'll sell my gadgets to everyone and everyone will be super, and when everybody is super, nobody will be. This modifier is put in. You see how we modified from this to this? And it makes an interesting plot point. It makes a nice sandwich for the script. When your script is done, you do what everybody does in our field. You revise. You go back through and you make changes. And you remember what many, many people have said. George Lucas is credited with this, but I don't think he originated it. Great works of art are never completed. They are only abandoned. So you're constantly revising your work. You're constantly changing it. Don't marry your script. Right? I'm a huge believer in marriage. I've been married 22 years. I think marriage is awesome. If any of you are ever privileged to get married, hold on. It's wonderful. Don't marry your script. People are going to come along and they're going to rip your script to pieces. They're going to change your script. They're going to revise your script. They're going to change your characters. Let it go. Let it happen. Michael Crichton, great writer, wrote Jurassic Park and many, many other great stories. They used to say, "Is this what you wrote?" "Nope." "Well, why didn't you say anything?" "Got paid." He was like, as long as they're paying me, they can make that Tyrannosaurus Rex dance in a tutu for all I care. Right? As long as I'm getting paid, let it go. That concludes our lecture on scripts. Thank you.